What's up, guys? Welcome to our 100K Q&A. Thank you so much for sending in your questions, and some of you even sent in videos, which was honestly so nice to put a face to some of your names. So I really appreciate that. Like I've done before, I've kind of grouped these questions into different categories, and we'll cover everything from career, mental health, school, creativity. But before, I just want to say thank you so much for supporting the channel. Every time I release a new video, I am quite amazed that thousands of people actually watch the videos. And usually for architects to be able to show their work to the world, they might spend months and months working on a project and enter competitions for the small chance that they might get some publicity. So I feel very fortunate to have an audience who watches my videos and is willing to give me their time. And yeah, just know that I really appreciate this opportunity. Also, I have partnered with Pacific Arc, who I have been working with throughout the year, and they are amazing. And I have an architectural toolkit to give away, 3 of them, and I'll be announcing them throughout the video. So make sure you keep your ears open for your name. And stick around till the end because I have some very important channel announcements. All right, so let's get started.
Right now, I'm in grad school in the US, and I'm struggling to convince my very pragmatic-minded thesis professor of my conceptual ideas. And I'm wondering, because your thesis was somewhat conceptual, did you face any adversity trying to kind of ground your project in the real world when you were in school?
This is a great question. And I did have a very conceptual thesis. And actually, at the very first presentation of my thesis year, I got ripped apart for my work. And that was probably one of the worst presentations that I've ever done. And whenever you have a bad crit, it's very important for you to reflect on why these juries gave you such a bad review. I think this helped me actually re-strategize on how to present my work and the overall direction of the project. So yeah, I was talking about super conceptual ideas like the library of the mind and like slow reading and categorization. So I really needed something to ground these ideas. And for me, that was through aggressive case studies and turning those case studies into useful data. So one thing about case studies is that they're really good for learning about how other people have designed the buildings, but it's also a really great way to build a defense for your design moves. Like a lot of the times people do case studies, but they have a hard time showing how they incorporated that and use that for your project. So breaking it down into a very simple graphic like this can be very helpful. If you want to learn more about how to use case studies to create a defense for your project, you can go here. So once you've proven that and have a real world foundation, then you can kind of step back into a more conceptual territory. And that was just my way of doing it, but there's also other ways of doing it too. One of my friends also had a really conceptual project, which was about making. And his project was all about the process of designing a building. And I think the most important part is to turn your project into something that could be valuable and contribute to the profession of architecture.
Now that you are working, do you feel that you still get to use that conceptual part of your brain that you honed during school?
Not exactly in the way you would use it in school. The firm that I'm at does talk about architectural ideas more at a conceptual level than other firms that I've been at. But I actually understand that this is a necessary part of being a profession with like deadlines and liabilities. And, you know, in the end, we are providing a service to a client who comes to us with very practical problems to solve. So I try to exercise this more conceptual part of my brain through these videos. Some of these architecture videos, like the process of making these requires a lot of like creating connections between different things. And I really like that. So I think having something on the side where you could exercise that creative part of your brain could be a nice release for you when you start working in the field. Does the choice of different universities matter, or do they all teach the same things? From Charbel. Yeah, so the choice of university definitely matters. Some universities focus more on the conceptual side, some universities are more technical, and some universities are more industry focused. So I would definitely do a little bit of research before you start applying. Being not so good with software, what is the best site to learn from? And how did you find the software that best suits your workflow? Skillshare actually has a pretty good Revit course. I have a discount code if you want to use it. You can get 1 month for free, and I'll leave it in the link below. And if you're willing to pay, Udemy also has a pretty good course on Revit and on creating Revit families. SketchUp is pretty intuitive, and I never actually took a course for it. The other tool that I use pretty often is Rhino, and Udemy also has some good courses on that as well. And I learned Rhino when I was in school through the courses that one of my profs made. I would say Rhino is probably my favorite 3D modeling tool, but I don't really use it anymore because it's like super expensive. So I use SketchUp for the schematic and DD stuff, and Revit for everything else. But if you're in school, like, I would experiment with these different software because you do have the student version, which is free. I think you'll realize that once you start working, the software that you use isn't really up to you anymore. It's kind of up to the industry of your region and what the firms use and how expensive the software is. Yeah, SketchUp is like relatively cheap compared to Rhino, so a lot of firms use this. And I found that a lot of firms will use a more like fluid modeling software like SketchUp Rhino for the conceptual or the schematic or design stuff. And then they'll move into Revit for the drawing and like the more complex BIM modeling. My question is, do we need a good diploma in architecture to work at a successful company, or do they value work quality more? I'm gonna refer you to my video, Steps on Becoming an Architect, to get a more in-depth response. You definitely do need to go to an accredited school and get the right degrees. But if you're talking like quality of school, I think going to a good school definitely helps. Like if you went to Harvard or MIT, when you see that on a resume, you're automatically impressed. But that doesn't mean that you can't impress people with your portfolio. Like, I went to a school that was not that well known, so I really had to build up my portfolio. But when I started working, I had colleagues who went to Harvard and UBC. So I think once you enter into the field, everyone kind of starts at level 0. So I think what's more important is your portfolio and your network, like who you know and who you can get a really good reference from. How did you deal with burnout as a student? It's from Caitlin. So one of the main differences between being tired and being burnt out is that when you're burnt out, you don't see a foreseeable improvement in your situation. You feel like you're doing all of this hard work for nothing. And I actually know business owners who work like 10 times harder than employees, but it's usually the employees that you hear going through burnout. And I think that's because if you're a business owner, you kind of see that the pain and the stress that you're going through is gonna eventually lead to a progress in your financial situation. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm feeling burnt out or feeling unmotivated is journaling. Journaling's had a pretty big impact on my life, from starting this YouTube channel to improving my relationships. And whenever I'm feeling like I'm in a rut, I journal. This is one of my favorite exercises. So I ask myself, what would my life look like if I could achieve everything I ever wanted in 3 years? And 3 years is not that close, but it's also not that far. So it doesn't really have to be realistic, and it can be as wild or as crazy as you want, but just like write down everything that comes to your mind. And yeah, like something that you would like to achieve or something you would like to have in 3 years' time. But one of the problems that I had when I was trying to do this exercise when I was in school is that in 3 years, I would still be in school. But, there's still a lot of things that you could do in that sphere. And for me, it was getting really good at presentations and becoming a confident speaker. For you, it could be winning a scholarship, or it could be getting good grades, or maybe after your exercise, you might realize like you don't even want to be in school in the next 3 years. But I think without a vision, you're just going through the motions. Even if you're doing something as menial as like doing renderings, if you have a big vision of getting like straight A's, you're gonna feel more motivated to figure out the best way to do the renderings and like the fastest way to do the renderings. And you're gonna wanna build systems, and you might wanna try figuring out a different way to tell a compelling story. So yeah, I think a visioning exercise can be really powerful and motivating. But like if you want to take this one step further into real actionable steps, you can break this down into smaller pieces and, try to just pick like 2 or 3 things out of that list that's the most important for you, and, like break it down into habits that you can do every single day to get to that goal. So the very first winner of the giveaway is Justin Soto. Congratulations, Justin. You just won Pacific Arc's Everyday Kit. I'll be in touch.
Hi, Dami. I was wondering about the work-life balance as an architect. So as a student, was the workload manageable? Did students have time for other pursuits? And as a working professional, how's the work-life balance? Are the hours always really long and stressful? Is overtime always expected?
I want to be totally honest with you. I did not have great work-life balance when I was in school. I just wasn't that good at time management. And I pulled a lot of late nights and did a lot of all-nighters. And eventually, I did get better at time management, but I was still working late nights, and I'm pretty sure I've shaved off quite a few years off my life, just not super healthy. But it probably was the time of my life when I grew the most. And I do sometimes wonder if I would have been able to produce the projects that I did and like got good grades and stuff if I hadn't worked so hard. And so I think there's like 2 sides of this. There's the actual workload, and there's the culture of overworking in architecture. Looking back, I think the workload actually was kind of manageable if I had been more strategic about my time. But I think the problem for me was that there was an incredibly steep learning curve, going from high school to uni. And the second thing was the culture of all-nighters and people saying like, oh, you can sleep when you're dead. And that combined with your studio project, because if you're really into your studio project, you could literally like iterate and iterate and iterate over and over again. So when you have this mindset and this culture around you where everyone is like working around the clock, then you automatically think, okay, like I have all night to work on this project. And when you're sitting there for that long, your productivity just goes downhill. Like you really need to let your brain rest and like do some creative thinking. But working late week after week, you're just more tired and you're not working fast. And, there's this thing called Parkinson's Law that says your work expands to fill the amount of time that's available. I think that's kind of what happens in architecture school. And the other side is that when you're talking about work-life balance, it's great. I think the fact that we're talking about this more is really great. But I'm actually a little bit afraid that it's misguiding people. And no, I don't think you need to work all day, all night and sacrifice your health. But I don't think you need to draw such a hard line between work and life, especially when you're in school. You're investing thousands and thousands of dollars in your education and in your growth and in your self-discovery. And this is one of the few times in your life where you're surrounded by people who are like smarter than you and more experienced than you, and they're paid to teach you stuff. Also, this is the time in your life when you're gonna have the most energy. Trust me, it's gonna go downhill from here. So when you're in school, my advice would be to actually explore your interests and work as hard as possible, but also try to focus on building systems. And this is gonna eventually help you be more efficient and not have to work so many hours. However, when you start working, it's a totally different story. You know, when you're working, no matter how much you might like your work, you are still getting paid for your time. So you do need to draw some hard lines. I think as an architect and as a creative professional, there are so many opportunities for you to create your own side business, and you're not getting to use that time for those other things that you could be using your time for. And there's also the side of like, if you keep working overtime for free, you're lowering the standards for everyone in the industry. Like for me, I had a really bad work-life balance last year, especially during COVID. But one of my colleagues got burnt out and just like left with very little notice. And that was actually kind of an eye-opener for me. I realized that if I kept working like this, I was gonna burn out too, inevitably. Like at my performance review, I told my bosses that, you know, my goal moving forward is to have better work-life balance and to only work my contracted number of hours. And they were accepting of that. I think we're all learning from this. And I think the industry has been actually pretty bad about work-life balance, but it needs to change. And it is changing. I used to think that I had to get more productive and I had to get faster at doing things, but I realized it's actually about prioritizing and saying no to things and saying no to people, which is hard. You know, saying no to people is hard because we don't like disappointing people, right? I think controlling your environmental factors have a bigger and a faster impact than you just trying to fix everything yourself. Yeah. My question is about your long-term goals and plans as an architect. When you're an architect already, what else exactly is there to aim for? Do you have a specific award you aspire to achieve? It's a good question. Yeah, lots of things. I still consider myself pretty much an infant in the field, and I want to get more experience working on different building types and working with different types of clients. But mostly, I would say I really want to learn about the business side of architecture, and this is probably counter-effective for the partners at my firm, but they really inspire me, and part of me really wants to do what they're doing. And I don't know if I'll ever start my own firm someday, but you know, I do feel like we are kind of in the golden age of entrepreneurship. You know, I'm not gonna lie, like the idea of building something that's yours, that's really attractive to me. But, you know, I just want to make sure that I don't leave the nest before I learn how to fly. How was your life at architecture school? Did you join other activities along with school? Yeah, so I actually did do quite a lot of extracurricular activities when I was in school. Most of them were related to architecture. I was on the student council, so we organized parties and events and stuff. And as a first year, that was a really good way for me to meet the older students. I was also a part of this group called Freedom by Design, which was a nonprofit organization that helps retrofit the spaces for people who have mobility issues and like makes the spaces more accessible, which is where I met Terry, who was one of our clients, and he had MS. And, you know, he actually inspired one of my projects. I used to also they were called Design Jam Night or something like that. And it was hosted by U of T, University of Toronto, which is another school in Toronto. And, you know, they would let students come and present their work so you could get feedback from different profs and grad students. And it was in like a chill bar setting. And that's where I met my friend Dave, who I traveled across the US with to see Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. By the way, I'm actually working on a project where I'm making all of those projects accessible for people. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of notes from these buildings, and I never actually properly shared them on the internet. So I'm working with my assistant to sort through all of those and make these accessible for you all. So stay tuned. I also did a competition with some building science students, and it was called Race to Zero. I learned a lot about net zero buildings, and it was a really good portfolio piece that was built on real construction methods. All of these things gave me experiences that I couldn't get in the regular school curriculum. And yeah, it's had a really positive impact on my life. So I would highly recommend doing these extracurricular activities if you can. How did you choose your job after the internship and exams? And could you possibly work at the architecture firm you worked for in the past? Yeah, this is a great question. And I actually covered this in my video, what I learned on my journey to become an architect. I'll leave it right here. And I talk about the thought process behind how I picked the firm just after graduation. When you just graduate, those first couple of years are so important for your growth that I actually try to tell people to try to follow people, not necessarily money or projects, because those first few years, you really need to be working under people who are willing to teach you, and you need to be in a place that has a culture of learning. But when you finish your internships and exams and become a licensed architect, yeah, you're still learning, but you know the fundamentals of how to be an architect, and you can start managing your own project. So this is actually when your career really starts. And so now you can start taking the other things into equation, like the project, money, company, and people. Once you're at this point, and if you're interested in growing fast as an architect, I think personally, the priority now should be the project and the firm. What kind of projects do you want to work on? And where do I need more experience? And are there different typologies I want to try? And, where can I go that's going to let me manage my own projects? So for me, when I was applying, I just really wanted to work on cool projects. And I really wanted to get more experience working on like public and institutional projects. And I felt like Faulkner Browns, which is the firm that I'm at right now, was doing like the coolest work in Vancouver. But what I'm realizing now is that what's more important than getting the cool projects on your portfolio is the process. And you're actually there to learn the process that produces the cool work. And the next question was, would you ever go back, or could you ever go back to the firm that you were at? Yeah, definitely. If you wanted to, and if you left on a good note, you could definitely go back to the firm that you worked for. But for me, working at different firms is the best way to accelerate your growth, because you can learn from different architects and see how each of them operate. But actually moving firms is really hard because, you have responsibilities and you've built relationships with people, and you have your projects that you're probably going to want to finish. And usually architecture projects take a really long time. So in an ideal world, actually, I wish I had another 5 to 10 years to try working at more firms and try working under different architects so that I have a larger research pool to understand what I like and what I don't like. It's like if you marry the guy that you started dating in high school, you just know that one guy. But if you try dating around, then you know what's out there and you know what's good or not, right? And the second winner of the giveaway is Mariana Romero Mendez. Congratulations, Mariana. I'll be in touch.
My question is, if you have any advice for anyone who's currently studying architecture in one country, say the United States, but is interested in working in another country, say Canada.
I would apply to large firms, and I would start early, because large firms typically have the resources and systems in place to hire people from abroad, and you might not get as much money in the beginning, but it is a good way to get your foot in the door and, get some experience in that country. And also start early. When firms hire someone from abroad, it's either because you're a recent graduate or a designer, or you have a very specialized skill. And the further you get into your career, and once you become an architect, your experience gets more specific to the region you're working in terms of the building code or like construction methods. And most firms are going to be hiring you to manage a project when you're an architect. And you can kind of only do that if you have local experience. So I would say try to do this during your internship. And I think that will be the best time for you to get that international experience and get your foot in the door in that region. Do you find your job fulfilling? And do you specialize in a type of architecture? If so, which ones? So right now, I do find the job fulfilling, but it wasn't always like this. I actually spent some time to think about this because we have a couple new interns in our office, and I want to help them, get to a point where they feel like this as well. Because the first few years of my internship was kind of hard for me, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. And I think I really only started to enjoy the work and feeling fulfilled when I had ownership of the project instead of just doing a task. And when I started managing the project, or when I became the point of contact, or when I started controlling the output, that's when it became fun for me. Because now I could actually see how the pieces fit together, and I could actually see how the decisions that I made in the beginning are impacting me during construction. And I think just my personality type is, I want to say problem solving, but maybe I just like talking to people. So yeah, I like working with different clients and consultants. And the other part that's been fulfilling is like helping the new interns. And this is actually the first year when I started having someone help me. And, usually I was the help, right? Like the process of teaching him and like figuring out the most effective way of helping him and helping him learn, I think that's been pretty rewarding as well. And to answer the question of, do I specialize in any type of architecture? I don't really specialize in one type, but I have done quite a few small interior fit outs, and I'm also working on a library, and my thesis project was a library. And I think libraries are just so cool, and I would love to keep doing more of this. So this is a long question, but I think it's important that I read out the entire question. I understand these types of injustices have been happening, but see the political, social, and economic events and issues unfold at a global scale, especially in 2020. I feel as though architecture does not have much of an impact to help aid and solve some of these issues. Considering who can afford architectural services or design in general, even with good intentions of solving or bringing awareness to political, social, economic issues through our work, it is still up to the client at the end of the day if these things are in line with their needs and wants. Understanding that impactful change can occur more at an urban planning level through establishing policies and etc. than architecture, what then can architecture truly impact at an everyday scale? Is architecture's impact different in that it exists only at a phenomenological level? This is a great question, Julian, and I used to think a lot about this too. One of the big things that I've been learning a lot about is creating an accessible and equitable space for everyone. A place where you feel welcome no matter what age or ethnicity or gender, or, whether you're in a wheelchair or you're hearing impaired. And I didn't really learn about this in school, but now cities are really pushing for a more accessible space for everyone, especially in the public realm, in the public projects, like libraries or community centers. It also depends on what type of architecture you want to go into. Architecture is so broad, and you really have to design your own career. Some architects are not interested in this. Like you said, they might be more interested in construction or phenomenology, and maybe for this, a smaller scale, like a residential architecture, might be better suited for you. But if these social issues are high on the priority list for you, I would recommend that you go to a firm that does more institutional projects and not so much private projects. I think the fact that you guys are asking these questions and really wanting to make a difference is really cool. And don't let this die out when you start working. And I think it's a part of your job to protect your optimism and not get so jaded by the realities of construction. I think the architecture industry has been kind of stale for a little while, but right now I think the environment is kind of ripe for some big changes in the industry. I don't know how far along in school you are, but when you get into the field, learn and absorb all the information, but don't take the status quo as your standard. Things that I'm doing at my job, I personally find this rewarding, but you guys are going to be smarter and you're going to be more connected than me. And so, you guys can do a lot more. Yeah, I wouldn't take the architecture industry as a standard and, don't accept my standard of fulfillment as your standard and, pave your own way and change the world. I have a question about your career. If one day, your YouTube career outrank your architecture career, from money, clients, fulfillment, freedom, and even pressure, would you continue to be an architect or be a full-time YouTuber? I feel all the architecture YouTubers struggle to be consistent, including you. I think the short answer is, yeah, absolutely. If I hit a point where YouTube gave me more money, clients, freedom, fulfillment, than being an architect, I would definitely quit architecture. I don't know if it's ever gonna be able to bring me fulfillment. I'm actually really curious about this, so let me know in the comments. Do you really think that making YouTube videos are gonna be able to bring you fulfillment? Or even more generally, if you could quit your job, would you? And for me, I'm just speaking for me, one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel is so that I can do architecture and do it the way I want without compromising my values. And doing what I like and being creative and doing interesting work on a daily basis is very important to me. But, who knows, my interests could definitely change over time. I think one of my strengths is that I'm pretty clear on things I enjoy and things I don't enjoy, because at the end of every day, I journal and I try to answer 3 questions for myself. What excited me, what drained me of energy, and what did I learn? And that's why I spend most of my YouTube income on paying editors, because I'm not interested in cutting videos, just like I'm not interested in becoming the best renderer or the best draftsman or draftswoman. And I learned how to do them, but I'm not interested in becoming an expert in them. I do know that I really enjoy designing and creating and writing and researching and storytelling and building and working with people. And those are the things that bring me the most fulfillment right now. And I think the sweet spot for me is somewhere between architecture and YouTube. Maybe I can have my own firm where I can do both and I can control my time and I can kind of choose the type of work I do. So yeah, I think that would be the sweet spot. How can you manage your time between your work and video editing? So for a lot of my videos, the simple videos like the Q&As or the videos where I'm just talking and delivering value, I try to outsource most of that. I've gotten to a point where I can outsource almost 100% of those videos. I rarely need to touch those videos. I just film it, send the footage. I've already created the templates and the structure and editing guidelines. I don't really need to spend time working on those. For the more high quality videos, like the architecture videos that I release on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, those ones actually I have a more experienced editor that I've been working with here in Vancouver. And we are actually in the process of starting a film company called Noli Media. I will leave the links to the website in the description if you want to check it out. But the goal is for us to create these more high production quality documentary style architectural videos. And yeah, we're both really interested in exploring the filmmaking side of architecture and how we can tell a visual story of architecture. Typically what happens is I'll create the script, and for those videos it's like very, very tightly scripted. So I'll spend most of my time on the script and the research, and I'll storyboard the videos and kind of plan out like what I would like to see in each area, what type of B-rolls, what kind of imagery, what kind of music. And then I start to work with my editor on the editing process, and I pass off the footage and the script to him, and he starts the editing process, and it's kind of a back and forth from there. And so that is a more intensive editing process. And the way I've structured my channel is that I'll have a couple of videos where I'm just like delivering value. It's mostly me talking in front of the camera. And then I'll have something around like 1 out of 4 videos that are these like more high production quality videos, which are the videos that I'm personally like more interested in making. This balance helps me have a more sustainable channel and a more sustainable, work-life balance. And yeah, I think that's how I'm able to make it work.
Hi, Dami. Here's my question. If you could go back 10 years and give yourself one piece of advice, it could be architecture related or YouTube related, what would it be?
Hey, Anthony. By the way, guys, Anthony went to architecture school with me years and years and years ago. And he also has an awesome YouTube channel. You guys should check it out. So that is a tough question. If I could give myself one piece of advice, and one only, this would be buy Bitcoin. Joking. This question actually made me do some serious reflection, because it's really asking, if there's one thing and one piece of information I could have known 10 years ago that would have had the most positive impact on my life, what would it be? So 10 years ago, that's around the time I would have started architecture school. And I think one of the biggest and best realizations of my life is that ultimately people only care about their own problems and their own shit that's going on in their lives. And mostly they're gonna forget about all the dumb shit you've done unless you slap the MC at the Oscars. I feel like I wasted a lot of time looking for the approval of other people, but in the end, I just needed approval from myself. And one of the best things I did was kind of shut down that part of my brain that was constantly worried about what other people thought and start this YouTube channel. It has really rewarded me handsomely. So that's the advice that I would give myself 10 years ago. So I have 2 announcements before we continue. I was super excited to get your questions, but what do you notice? Only one girl sent me a video, and I know for a fact that I have a 60-40 male to female ratio on my channel from my YouTube analytics, and I've gotten so many questions from female subscribers. This is actually a very common scenario. Like, women are often very underrepresented, especially in the architecture and construction industries. So we need to take every possible opportunity to support each other and learn from each other, because the challenges that you face as a woman in this field is, let's face it, very different from our male counterparts. So on May 21st and May 22nd, for the first time ever, my friend Joanne and her team is hosting a Women Architects Festival. If you don't know Joanne, she's the founder of Women Architects Collective Facebook group, which is an incredible, supportive community for women in the AEC industry. Especially when I was working by myself, this was my go-to place for asking questions. The Women's Architects Festival is kind of born out of that, and it's a virtual conference. They've got some incredible speakers. They're going to be covering topics like personal branding, burnout, motherhood, mentorship. The conference is taking place from May 21st to May 22nd, and I've got links to the tickets in my description, so I would highly, highly, highly recommend you check it out. But the second announcement, it's for all of you. over the past couple of years, this channel has really blossomed into something beautiful, and it's been a really great community, and I've connected with so many of you, and I've been inspired by you. So I've decided to create a Discord server where I can connect with you, but more importantly, where you can connect with each other and share your work and share your ideas and share resources and have meaningful conversations about things that you guys are passionate about. Right now, I am only opening it up to 50 seats because I actually want to, get to know you and, you just have better interactions with a smaller group. I really want to build this into a robust, supportive community before I open it up to people. If you are interested in joining this group and kind of helping me lay the foundations of this community, I have a quick questionnaire for you down in the description. The selection process is going to be really dependent on the dynamic of the group. I would love to get people from adjacent fields. I would encourage those of you who are not in architecture to fill out the questionnaire as well. I'm calling the server Archibeans. I don't know why it was the first thing that popped into my mind. But I see this as an evolving thing. I've just kind of created the initial framework, and it's going to evolve to best serve you and the community. Fill out the questionnaire if you're interested in helping me build the foundations of this. Okay, so the question is, what other creative projects interest you outside of architecture? So I am really interested in storytelling and, its ability to grab people's attention in both video and audio formats. I'm kind of in the process of turning my thesis project into a series of videos. Not really because I think I had such a cool project. It's really not. Because I'm trying to learn how to turn something kind of complex, like an architectural thesis, into something more digestible and interesting for people. I heard somewhere that one of the most important traits of an architect is someone who can explain exactly why they prefer something. I think it's so fascinating how architects get into architecture and, find this new world of expressing the world. And we're totally engrossed by it. But yet the general public or the normies has no idea why we're obsessing over this detail. And I think we just haven't really found a good way to communicate it to the world. And the process of turning my thesis into a video, it's been really illuminating because it's given me lots of insights on my own education. First of all, we didn't have a maximum word limit on our thesis, and we had a minimum word limit, but with video, you want to be as efficient as possible with your words and deliver as much information in as little time as possible. So just by that, it tells you engaging a larger audience has never really been an architect's priority, but I think it should be. The other thing that I've been really interested in is audio storytelling or audio journalism, which I think is a totally different beast. And one of my favorite things in the world is podcast. And my all-time favorite podcast will be This American Life. If you don't know about it, it's a collection of stories from different people, and every episode it's on a central theme. And one of my favorite stories, there's so many, it's hard to choose, is probably about love and whether we can teach ourselves to love people who are hard to love. And the third and last winner of the giveaway is Amanda Lang. Congratulations, Amanda. I'll be in touch. So what are some things you do to keep inspired or help you learn about architecture? Right now, I'm not reading too many architecture books or sketching at the moment. And when I have time to read, I'm reading more about business books. I'll just refer you to my website link that has all the books that I would recommend. And yeah, I'm reading more business books, and it's actually more of a logistical problem more than anything. I listen to a lot of books on Audible, when I'm walking or exercising, and lots of architecture books just are not available in audio format. And I'd have to say the things that inspire me the most right now are just being involved in some of the projects that are shaping the future of Vancouver, which is where I live. I think one of the advantages of being an architect in a city that's like relatively underdeveloped or relatively new compared to cities like Rome or New York is that the city is also trying to figure things out, and it's like testing new policies, and you can really be a big part of the city building process and like work with the planners to try to direct things in a more positive way. I'm also trying to get into the housing market in the next year or so, and I like living here. These urban planning policies have a direct impact on me. That gives me more motivation to get involved. The other thing that's been inspiring for me is like working with the librarians on the library project. You know, they're super knowledgeable and passionate about the libraries, and working with them has been really inspiring. I think all of our civic projects, even if they're just like tiny renovations, they're under this city's new goal of like providing accessible, equitable space for the widest possible audience. And so, yeah, that's pretty inspiring for me as well. Even if I'm doing like a toilet layout, I'm kind of like, yeah, this is actually going to help someone. My colleagues and the partners at the firm are kind of, I guess, a constant source of inspiration for me, you know, especially when I watch them navigate really difficult conversations. Like one of the partners, he's quite soft-spoken. He's a soft-spoken British guy, but he's just got this talent for like gathering the focus in the room and cutting through the noise and just clarifying the goal for everyone while making everyone feel at ease, you know, even in the most complicated situations. So yeah, that's something I'm trying to learn as well. Lastly, like growing this YouTube channel has been really exciting and inspiring. Seeing this YouTube channel grow and talking to students and other architects and architecture enthusiasts. When I was first starting the channel, like people were telling me not to make a channel about architecture because it's too small of a niche. But look, you know, there's a huge amount of architects and people who are interested in architecture. I think to sum it up, what's been really inspiring for me lately are the people around me, just doing amazing things and creating everyday miracles.